For those who missed the beginning, I'm helping moderate this session and asking some questions. I'm just going to repeat a few key points because we just got some messages saying the sound wasn't working straight from the start. So when we have collected a lot of your questions through the registration process and compiled them into themes that allow us to sort of answer as many inquiries as possible. And towards the end of our town hall tonight, we will be taking questions through our live stream chat. So feel free to contribute questions and inquiries through there, anything that comes up, and we'll get to it. Another fun note, we have Councillor Carra's little puppy Izzy in the room with us. So you might hear some barking on occasion. Yeah, and if you have any trouble with the sound, with submitting a question or even registration, you can call Mohammed at 403-200-7476. I will repeat that one more time, 403-200-7476. And now I will turn it over to Councillor Carra and Councillor Chahal to introduce themselves.
Go first, George. All right. Well, thank you, Shifra, for that introduction. Welcome, everybody. This is George Chahal, and our City Councillor in Ward 5. Those are the communities north of McKnight Boulevard, east of the Deerfoot, all the way to the city limits. I'm also honored and privileged to represent many communities of Ward 10 since the retirement of Councillor Ray Jones. And the communities that I'm representing in Ward 10 are Rundle, Whitehorn, Temple, Monterey Park, Coral Springs, and the industrial areas north of 16th Avenue. Just a little bit about me, born here in Calgary at the Holy Cross Hospital in Mission, grew up, my parents lived in Pembroke at the time, so I am a Pembroke boy. I grew up in Rundle and the communities of Saddle Ridge for majority of my life, and I've had the opportunity to live and work in Northeast Calgary for over 40 years of my life. And it was an honor and privilege to be elected in 2017 as the Ward 5 councillor for Ward 5 in Northeast Calgary. So that's a little bit about me. Welcome. We have a great turnout tonight, and I look forward to addressing as many of your questions as we can this evening. Councillor Carra.
Thanks, George. George also did mention that we both went to school together.
Yes,
so it's fabulous to be reunited all these years later around the City Council table. My name is Giancarlo Carra. I've had the incredible honor of representing the great neighborhoods of Ward 9 since 2010. I was elected alongside our great mayor, Ed Nenshi. And I've been working in the environment that he's created on council since then. My mission at City Hall is called Great Neighborhoods, and it's based on a 10-year career I had prior to becoming a politician, city building across North America as a design consultant, but then also working with sleeves rolled up in the communities of East Calgary. I was specifically the president of the Inglewood Community Association, and I did a lot of my master's work in the communities of Greater Forest Lawn, envisioning the rebuild of International Avenue and the introduction of the Max Purple line, which has become reality, and I'm super proud about that. I'm also excited to be representing East Calgary alongside, as you heard, a bona fide East Calgary boy in George Chahal. And since Ray Jones's retirement, we've split the ward roughly along 16th Avenue, but I pop up for Pine Ridge and Vista Heights, part of the Crossroads communities, and of course the South Airways industrial area. South of 16th Avenue is of course Malin Heights, the other half of the Crossroads communities. It's the incredibly diverse and cool Franklin industrial area. It's Marlborough Park and Abbeydale. And it's really cool to have a strong East Calgary connection. So Great Neighborhoods is based on really a 5-point transformation. I've been pursuing at City Hall for 10 years, and it's really based on the idea that great neighborhoods make a great city. Great neighborhoods are places that are mixed use. They're for people of all ages, all stages and wages. And a lot of the work that I think council is increasingly focused on is around how do we create a city of inspiring neighborhoods for everyone. With that in mind, let's have a conversation about your neighborhoods and your concerns, and let's make this happen. Chef?
Yeah, so we're gonna get started. Our first question is about engagement. So we've had this question with a lot of Calgarians come up over the last few days in council, and we would love to hear from both of you about how we can better engage the public to participate and contribute to the improvement for their communities.
I'll start.
Sure.
This is an extremely important topic for me. Since being elected, I've spent a lot of time focusing on engaging with our community. So you may have heard Chahal with Chahal. What is Chahal with Chahal? Well, pre-COVID, I'd get together at the Genesis Center every week or every 2 weeks, bring a big pot of chai, and sit down and meet residents in our Ward 5 communities to hear your issues and concerns. And during COVID, what we've done when the weather's been nice, we've showed up in your community parks and playgrounds and advertised it that way and had many great conversations. And that's giving me an opportunity to have direct access to your issues and concerns right in to your communities. A big gap in East Calgary that I've seen is also the city's way of communicating with many of our ethnocultural communities. Ward 5, the communities I represent, 2/3 of our population, English and French is not their first language. So that does pose many challenges with communications to our ethnocultural communities. So that's where I brought forward a multilingual engagement and communications notice of motion to help address many of those issues. And many of the good work from that notice of motion, which I brought in right after I got elected, has been deployed today with helping support some of our COVID relief work we're doing. And that's extremely important. We have many newcomers immigrating here to the city of Calgary from all over the world, and we want them to feel welcome here, but we also want to help and support them through their time of integrating here. So whatever information we can provide and better communicate with them and have that better understanding of where they live and some of the issues they have, it helps connect them to city services so they can establish themselves as residents here and feel really comfortable in doing so. A new initiative that we brought forward in our office is Chahal's Future Leaders, and we want to engage youth in our community. The best days of my job is when I get to talk to a school group or be at the high school football team and be on the field with them and to talk with them about their futures, dreams, and aspirations. It's important that we engage our youth, so we wanted to give youth in our community a platform to engage with us and to work on policy initiatives and bring forward ideas that I can advance at City Council. That's something that we just started, and you can feel free to reach out to us if you or a family member or a friend wants to connect and be a part of that. One big initiative that I've been doing since being elected is that we have community cleanups all over the city. What we did is we've heard concerns, and this is one of the promises that I ran on that I wanted to change in our community. How our communities are viewed and looked at is, I believe, a safe community is a clean community. So we started our own Ward 5 cleanup. I hope to include Ward 10 communities this year. And this is a little bit different than your community association cleanups. This is where we grab some garbage bags as individuals, we clean our roadways, our parks, our playgrounds. It's neighbors helping neighbors. Maybe your neighbor needs their lawn mowed or they need some help moving some stuff. It's really getting out on that day every year to help support your neighbors and do a little bit of work in your community. And we had a very successful one last year after that big hailstorm. We were able to get over 1,000 volunteers out to help do that. We'll be doing it again this year, and I look forward for all of you to participate.
Thanks, George. It's a pleasure to work with someone who has deep roots in the community they serve and is out on literally a daily basis working in community. George is a great inspiration in that regard. A lot of my work came out of the work I did in community associations, either in community associations or working for and with community associations in East Calgary. And my office is absolutely committed to making sure that every volunteer who steps up to play a leadership role at the community level is supported by our office. So we always have a member of Team Ward 9 at every Ward 9 community association meeting. And we also make sure that the new Ward 10 team that we've assembled, we've got Bethel and Mohammed, they've divvied up the community associations and they attend Ward 10 community associations with support from my office. And anytime I'm needed, I'm there. Point 2 of my 5-point Great Neighborhoods platform is based on the idea that our neighborhoods are actually more than the people who live there. And community associations are an incredible structure, but they usually represent just the residents. And the question that I'm concerned and interested in is how do we get more people who make up the neighborhood around the table, and how do we get neighborhoods that don't have a lot of residents, some of our industrial communities, the same kind of organizational structure so they can be supported by City Hall. They're the ones who are generally paying the most taxes. So I believe that neighborhoods are the people who live there, neighborhoods are the businesses that operate in the community, and they're also the institutional actors, whether it's the schools, the faith communities, the not-for-profits. And what I'm really interested in is working towards a future structure where community associations can be joined by other groups and we can really plug city services into those community areas and cater them to the needs of individual communities. We have, over the last years, undertaken a lot of study about how to better serve and better plug into and better empower local communities. And the findings of our work in that regard pointed to the idea that we should really focus at a multi-community level. And so the first community that's been sort of granted the opportunity to pilot what that kind of next generation structure will look like are the communities of Greater Forest Lawn. So between Memorial Drive and Pagan Trail, between Deerfoot Trail and the Ring Road, Council, and with George's help, granted us money to sort of sit down and work out a pilot structure. And the idea is that we're going to do planning and governance and service delivery and communications at the multi-community level, and looking forward to all of that happening. The big question, of course, is how do we plug in? 12 CSI is doing great work with this community newsletter. How do we make that multilingual? How do we make that digital? How do we get everybody in your community working together, and how do we serve those conversations? How do we facilitate as the city and then serve the outcomes of those conversations? That's what we're working on.
I just want to say one thing. Giancarlo mentioned a lot of important initiatives, and we really work together, both of us. And I think for both of us to be able to represent the Ward 10 communities, as well as our own wards, it's an honor and privilege. And you may have seen, I was out at the Alex on 17th Avenue Community Center last weekend, and Councillor Carra, Giancarlo was also there a few weeks ago, meeting residents and talking to them. And then we both had the opportunity to deliver with members of our community food hampers, I think during COVID, supporting the East Zone Partnership and many great organizations. So we are a team working together to represent you. We don't always agree on everything. I mean, I think that's a great thing about our city council, but we are working together to bring forward solutions to better represent all residents of East Calgary.
That's great to hear from the two of you, which actually leads quite naturally into our next question. And before I get into it, I will read a few comments that we had come through from our registration form. There's a resident who lives in Mayland Heights who's talking about their interest in seeing a complete community. They'd love to see, more improvements specifically for mobility, for cycling and walking. There's also another comment around congested cities and the concern that might happen in regard to the guidebook. So the next question is, how will the guidebook impact the communities of East Calgary? And we'll start with TC.
Okay, so point 1 of my 5-point Great Neighborhoods platform is that if great neighborhoods make a great city, we should really focus our work as a city on the outcome of great neighborhoods rather than just expecting them to happen just as some sort of like side effect of whatever the city's otherwise focused on. And so the first point is that we need to transform how we plan and develop the city into making great neighborhoods, which are complete, compact, walkable, mixed-use places, the norm. Right now, we celebrate some of our walkable communities that are mixed use, and the reality is that it's been very hard to get to those places. They become overly expensive, and we want to make that the norm so that every community is served by a mix of housing types, that has the right population size, so that the schools are always full, and is able to deliver catered services to every neighborhood's needs. So we're moving to that multi-community level, and the guidebook for great communities sort of sits at the center of this transformation of our planning system. The only other thing I want to note is that in 2009, before I became a city councilor, long before Councillor Chahal became a city councilor, City Council passed a new municipal development plan that said that the age of taking our tax dollars and subsidizing growth on the edge of the city and forever sprawling outward has to come to an end. We have to start growing up, otherwise we're not going to be able to afford our city, we're not going to be able to drive a diversified economy, we're not going to create the kind of social environment that supports everybody, and we're gonna continue to live a lifestyle that is not the best for our environment. And so the idea of creating focusing growth into existing neighborhoods and creating complete communities was enshrined into law in 2009. And a big reason why I went to City Hall, because I said, it's one thing to say we should do this, but if you don't have the system to get there, it's never gonna happen. And so the Guidebook for Great Communities sits at the center of the transformation to actually bridge that say-do gap and actually start supplying Calgarians with the kind of full meal deal communities that they want to live in and they aspire to live in. And how do you do that? The first thing you do is you have to work with the community. I am absolutely opposed to the idea that you're going to do some top-down thing and say everything should be mixed. There are things that we love about our communities. There are things that we need. So local area planning is how we're doing it. And we're splitting the city into 40 local area planning zones. One of the first ones on deck will be the communities of Greater Forest Lawn. And we're going to march north into Ward 10 and into Ward 5 over in the years ahead. But it starts with the guidebook. The third thing that the guidebook does is it starts to drive, after you plan what you want your neighborhood to be, and we say we need a main street, we need a park, when we have the plans, then we can start funding it. So the years of taking our tax dollars and sending them out are coming to an end, and the years of planning for what we want our neighborhoods to become and reinvesting our tax dollars are right ahead of us. And then the final thing is, it's a really nerdy thing, but what we're allowed to do on the land and what we want the land to become are totally separate things that the guidebook will bring together, and we'll have policy and land use living in the same place. But it all starts with the guidebook, which is like a recipe book for having conversations with communities about how to change their communities. I'm super excited about it. I'm sorry there's a lot of chop, but I'll turn it over to George to sort of talk about some of the things we heard in the fight over the last several days over whether we should pass the guidebook into law.
Well, I think that's a great overview you've provided, Giancarlo. For me, Malin Heights, I grew up taking the school bus for 12 years to Colonel McLeod and Stanley Jones, First Elementary, Colonel McLeod Junior High, and Crescent Heights from Saddle Ridge. And so for me, we used to go right through Malin Heights and in the winter get stuck on that 8th Avenue bridge, either rolling down and not being able to get up and trying to navigate that for quite some time. Malin Heights, I've seen it's significantly changed and there's tremendous opportunity there. And there's one barrier we have, and there's a pathway that can connect Malin Heights to Renfrew, but a lot of the East Calgary communities are disconnected from the other side of the Deerfoot. And we call it this big Deerfoot divide. So why can't we have better integration of pathway systems, which I know in the Ward 5 communities, we have the airport, we don't have good pathway connections. And so a part of this work is also through those local area plans is seeing how do we create better communities and how do they integrate to better. And for me, when I look at it, I think I see it in a few different ways, what the guidebook's going to help us do moving forward. Starting with more of the communities that are a bit older and moving to some of the newer communities over time. But it's really about equity and diversification of the housing types in our community. So we can have young and old, aging in place. You can live in your community. You can be born in your community and retire in your community because you have the housing options to do so. We have multi-generational families that also can be able to continue to reside in their communities with their families and close to their family members. And then sustainability and affordability are extremely important as as our city grows and it gets more expensive to live here. This is a very efficient way to provide city services to all Calgarians. This is a way we can find the best use of your property taxes you pay, support local businesses, support local. We always talk about supporting those great restaurants in our communities that are from great entrepreneurs in our communities. This guidebook's going to help do all of that. And this is a big plan, which not everybody is affected by right away, but every community that will be impacted by it through a local area plan will have an opportunity to engage in that planning process to do what's right for their community. So I think it's a really good step in the right direction. We still have more work to do as a council in the upcoming weeks. We will work collaboratively to find the right solutions and bring forward good results for our city.
Yeah, we're gonna get this one over the line, and just very simply, the guidebook is the recipe book, and the local area plan is the meal you wanna make with your neighbors to serve the things that you love, right?
I always wanted to be a chef, so I can put ingredients.
I wanted to be a chef too.
We should have a cooking competition.
Okay, we should absolutely do that.
Maybe after COVID, we'll get you both in a kitchen and see what happens. All right, we are going to move along to a few questions about recreation, safety, roads, and infrastructure. We've had a couple of questions come in around street safety, and we would love to know more about projects that you both are working on that speak to street safety and infrastructure for pedestrians, cyclists, and recreational activities.
Sure, I'll start. It's a very good question, and I can talk about this issue probably for an hour. A couple of things that I brought forward that actually are coming to our next council meeting now is on storm pond safety. This was an important issue in our community, and I've raised this over the last few years. We had a child drown in a storm pond, and we had some seniors actually take off their turbans just a few months back and save some young girls off a frozen pond as they were ice was breaking. I've had the unfortunate, I almost drowned as a child, so I know the concerns parents have around storm ponds, and this is something we need to do as a review. And so what I'm doing is bringing forward a notice of motion to address issues and concerns that I've heard from Ward 5 residents and residents across the city on why are people accessing those ponds from going into the water? Why don't we have better signage? Why don't we have better natural barriers in place to provide those early warning signs and safety measures? So that's something we're bringing. Also, a streets play notice of motion. I grew up playing street hockey and shooting hoops in my neighborhood. Well, actually, you're not allowed to do that. And there's been a number of situations where we've had in the city sports equipment confiscated by bylaw officers, warnings given to kids. In my mind, that's not acceptable. I mean, our streets, our kids want to get out to play, and during COVID, we've seen a significant impact in the youth in our community. We need to get them out, and we need to change the rules so kids do have a safe opportunity to do that. When it comes to recreation, as you probably noted, I'm a bit of a sports and rec guy. For me, that's extremely important. One thing we've done in our Ward 5 community is identify where we have gaps, and we have a huge gap when it comes to really good sporting and recreational opportunities, parks and playgrounds, but also sports fields. We have some great news coming soon. This was a notice of motion I brought forward a few years ago, and we'll be breaking ground soon on the first turf field where there's 78 top quality fields in the city of Calgary. Northeast Calgary will get the first turf field in Northeast Calgary. So that's pretty exciting for me. We have new athletic fields, but when it comes to infrastructure, we've seen tremendous growth in East Calgary. We've seen some of the fastest growing communities. And I want to touch on the importance of Airport Trail. And I talked a bit about that gap of a pathway system. But Airport Trail, there is no pathway to the airport and beyond. But what it does create is a huge opportunity for tremendous growth of the airport, cargo logistics, and jobs growth in our local economy, and providing great access to Northeast residents. And I was worked very hard after getting elected with Minister Sohi, and we had the honor of having a Prime Minister Trudeau join us with Mayor Nenshi to open that roadway up, and we're just finalizing that connected piece. So those are a few updates, I guess, from a very high level and a detailed level that we're bringing in Ward 5 and some of our Northeast communities. And Councillor Carra, I just want to touch on And we had a great announcement on Barlow and 16th Avenue, the bridge decks, and the repairs that are being done there as well. So I think that's great news for all East Calgary residents. I'll turn it over to you.
Before that, this would be a great time to read out a participant comment that's talking about the CP bridge. Specifically, they were asking GC why the CP bridge was removed and to talk a little bit about why it hasn't been rebuilt.
You're talking about a CN bridge over connecting Applewood and Pembroke?
They just said CP bridge. We don't have any more information.
Okay, well,
So we can talk about both bridges.
Okay. Well, I've got a lot to talk about. Roads, recreation, infrastructure. George and I are big sports guys, and we're very proud to serve on the FAPRAC community, which is the Fieldhouse committee. And the big conversation there is: do we build one super duper Fieldhouse up by the university? I'm talking to George over here. I should be talking to the camera. Do we build one super duper Fieldhouse up by the university that makes Calgary a sports tourism destination, or do we take that money and we build 5 field houses dispersed throughout Calgary? And the answer is we need to do both. And the big debate right now is what we do first. And part of the things that we're tackling through FAPRAC is exactly that question. I want to touch on roads infrastructure just a little bit, because Ward 9 and Ward 10 and Ward 5 are a mix of neighborhoods and working landscapes. And one of the great appeals of living in the East is that you're so close to so many of the jobs that drive our economy. In fact, the East Side Industrial is the second biggest tax base and economic engine in the city of Calgary. So a lot of my work in that regard was focused from an infrastructure perspective on making sure that people could get in and out of, and we can do goods movements throughout the Southeast. And so we've improved Glenmore Trail. We're improving connections to Glenmore Trail throughout that. The introduction of the ring road's been big, and of course we worked with CN to get them get their intermodal stuff out to spacing on the name. Where did we move CN? Just outside of the city.
Delacour.
Yeah, out to Delacour. But the point is that freed up a lot of the goods movements and the ability to get to and from work in East Calgary, the industrial areas. Let's talk about recreation though. Number one, this is just a little shout out. We are opening in Marlborough, in the giant park in Marlborough Park, a disc golf course. It's going to be the first disc golf course designed by and for women disc golfers. And I think Katrina LeMay-Doan and I are going to be opening that in the beginning of April. And as soon as we lock those, you're going to have to come out and throw it with us. The other thing, of course, I'm so supportive of George's notice of motion to allow play on the streets. And one of the things that council did to allow that to happen is we just reduced the speed limit citywide to 40 kilometers an hour. But much more importantly, we said as we start to rebuild our road system, as it comes time to replace pavement and stuff, we're going to tighten those roads up so that in inside neighborhoods, it's a 30 kilometer per design speed. And at 30 kilometers per hour, cars and people playing and walking and all of those things become a very natural thing to do together. It's when you leave your neighborhood pod and you enter higher order roads that are designed to get people in between neighborhoods and to and from different parts of the city, that's when you start needing to introduce an active modes network. And then the current terminology is A5. A5 stands for all ages and abilities all the time. And the idea is that you need to have a network so that people can get around the city, even if they're not in a car. And one of the things that my team and I did in Ward 9 is that we built a Ward 9 Dream Network map. And that is a conversation about how do you get around the ward now. We've got incredible bike path systems in Calgary, and we celebrate that. What are the things that we've done over the last couple of years and are actively doing to actually enhance that network? And then we list out all of the missing links that we need to start to focus our attention on and our advocacy on. The federal government just announced a huge, huge fund for active transportation, and we're going to be able to dip in and do that. One of the things that's neat that connects Ward 9 with Ward 9 and Ward 7 and Ward 10 is the Unite the Heights, which would take you from Franklin down 19th, across the 8th Avenue flyover that George mentioned, and all along 8th Avenue to the Green Line station in Crescent Heights at 9th. And so that Unite the Heights is a project that we're working on across wards.
Well, we'd love to unite some of the ridges with the heights, because we have the Falcon Ridges and the Saddle Ridges that we want to improve pathway and connectivity system as well. I think if we can find ways, and I think this is a great opportunity that both of us has, because we've worked on so many different initiatives in our own wards, but having Ward 10 to bring that better connectivity to things going east and west on your side and going north and south on my side, and bring them and weave them through Ward 10 for better connectivity, I think will really benefit all of our kids and seniors in our communities.
And let's be clear, I mean, East Calgary is an amazing place unto itself, and we really have to celebrate that and work with it. We think every ward should have a map, and the city should have a map, and so we produced that map as a sort of as a challenge to everybody to get together and do that.
We're gonna take you up on that challenge because we want to add a few things on those maps. I just want to touch on in our wards, we have a lot of seniors, and benches with covers is a big issue. As we get seats put in, smaller seating placements, which are huge, we have larger gatherings of seniors in our communities coming out in the spring, summer. So we want benches, but ones with some shade cover and cover to the elements. We had that big hailstorm last year. It's hard to run and get cover. And also some public washrooms, porta potties in spring, summer in those parks. So that's something we've done with 2 pilots. We want to expand that.
You two are having a great conversation with each other, and that's fantastic. But I'm gonna remind you to look at the camera because we have hundreds of people, well, over 100 people as part of this conversation. But George, I'm really glad that you brought that up because we just had someone comment saying, I live in Saddle Ridge, but I've also lived at different times in Rundle and Marlborough Park, starting in 1976, and have taught at the Bob Edwards School in Marlborough and Egbert in Marlborough as well. Yeah, and so I'm a longtime Northeast person. Thank you for being so involved and on top of our Ward 5 issues and concerns. I'm now a retired senior widow. Are you thinking about organizing a seniors advisory group at some time in the future?
Great idea, let's do it. Done. You're our first member of our seniors advisory group. Thank you for bringing that forward. We have so many seniors in our community that come out that I meet with. I met with a few going through some parks on the weekend. But we do need to connect our seniors, especially during the time of COVID. It's been difficult for many seniors in our community. So we do need to connect. We have the Falcon Ridge Castle Ridge Seniors 55 Club as well. I think that's a great resource to connect in with. And I know there's an amazing leader with that group, but we do need to expand that. They do a lot of great work for seniors in our community. And as we do have an aging population. And Ward 5 has Ward 10 and Ward 9. We have lots of seniors, and I met many on the weekend at the Alex as well. And the concerns are the same as many, that they want to be better connected. They want better access to services. So let's work on that together. Shoot me an email or give us a call, and we'll put our information on the maybe. We'll give it at the end as well, and we can connect and create a larger group.
And I just want to say that dovetails perfectly with the idea of great neighborhoods being places for people of all ages, stages, and wages, where you're embedded and integrated with your community at all stages of life. Of course, we've got some great seniors groups in East Cal, in Ward 9, and we're learning about Ward 10. But what we really want to do is create that sort of great neighborhood structure, so that you don't have these disparate organizations just doing their own great work, but they're working together to talk about how they can maximize service delivery and really make things work.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that with us. We will also be sending out this information afterwards for everyone who attended, so don't worry about scrambling it down if you hadn't had a chance to write it down. So this was kind of mentioned in a few of your responses beforehand, but let's dig into a little bit more detail. We had a lot of questions come through about the hailstorm and supports in regards to that. So what are some updates that either of you could provide about supporting the Northeast communities after the June 2020 hailstorm?
Well, I guess I can talk about the hailstorm. I was front and center involved on that in the evening of June 13th when the hail started coming down. A pretty scary evening to see that occur, and I was in the tunnel as it was flooding and talking to Chief Tom Sampson and figuring out what to do with that situation, and seeing many of our parks, Manmeet, St. Paul, School, the dry pond fill up, as they call lakefront property for those homes. I've never seen the dry pond so full. Snow on the ground, knee high in the communities of Saddle Ridge and Taradale. Blocks and blocks of cars, windows, sunroofs smashed, fronts of homes and windows smashed. And I think the one big thing I saw right away was our community coming together and helping each other out. So it's very, it's just so excited to see that so many of our residents came out of their homes to help each other out. What we've done since then is that, the first opportunity I brought forward a notice of motion a week later. We first initiated right away with a community response center at the Genesis Center, led by the Emergency Management Agency, with Giancarlo, that actually is the chair of that committee as well, and getting resources right out to our residents. We brought forward a big advocacy position. Right away, we said to the provincial government, this is provincial jurisdiction when it comes to disaster relief and mitigation. You need to step up and support our residents. And what we asked for was, supporting folks with incentives or grants or tax credits to help build their homes back better. We had a great opportunity. This is the second storm in 4 years that has nailed Northeast Calgary hard. This storm in particular, $1.5 billion of damage, where $800 million of damage came from the roofs. If we had better roofing materials put on those homes, they were built better, we could have prevented $800 million of damage. And that means lower insurance costs for all Calgarians and all Albertans. So we asked the province, we advocated, never got a very good response. So as a city, we moved forward. And what we did was, in September, we brought a tax relief motion, which council fully supported. I believe Councillor Carra seconded that motion as well, on supporting residents who needed help to defer their taxes for the following year. And a number of our residents did that, took up on that. That was a great initiative. Just recently, City Council, after doing all the review, we've come forward to bringing forward an incentive program that will give a rebate to residents who want to build their roofs better moving forward of $2,000, because it is about a $6,000 cost, and education, and then some regulatory reform as well with building codes. Giancarlo, you want to add to that? I don't want to take. Well, I can talk about this. There's so much with that here.
And it's really sort of impressive the leadership you've shown. I was in community in 2013 when the flood hit, and again, like Calgarians do, the community came together and really supported each other. I will say that there was a very shocking difference between what happened in the 2013 flood and what happened in the hail disaster that pummeled the Northeast. And that is that we did not get the support from our provincial government that you would have expected. And one of the things that I've taken a leadership role on with in my capacity as chair of Community Protective Services, we conducted a huge inquiry last July into systemic racism in the city of Calvary. And what we learned very clearly, no longer academic theoretical, was that our BIPOC community, our Black, Indigenous, and person of color community in Calgary, which is 37% of our population, as George said in his introductory remarks, a lot of that, the majority of that's concentrated into East Calgary, wards 9, 10, and 5, is that they do not enjoy the same relationship with our institutions that the white majority does. And when I think about what the provincial government did for the wealthy homeowners of Elbow Park and what they did in terms of creating tent cities that were never even used for tens of millions of dollars in the industrial southeast, just in case they had to move people from High River into housing. When I look at all of the money and effort that was expended by the provincial government, and then the deafening silence that occurred in the communities of the Northeast and is ongoing, I cannot help but put those two things together and understand that this is yet another example where our institutions are not serving all Calgarians and all Albertans like they need to. So I am horrified. I've had the opportunity, thanks to George, sort of inviting us up to the Northeast to.
We had that walking tour.
To wander around and see that many months later.
That was in October too.
Well, and you know what, the other thing is that the provincial government weighed in and really brought the insurance companies to heel. And that is absolutely what needs to take place here, because they have jurisdiction, they have the ability to regulate the insurance industry. And the silence is deafening, and that just breaks my heart, because as we know, it's the Northeast communities that are the essential workers that are keeping our entire project of Calgary going through this pandemic. So, thank you to George for his leadership, and myself and council has his back, and we need to make sure that the provincial government hears this and starts to do their work.
Thank you both for offering your perspectives on that. It's really great to hear that, this is something that can bring council together and work towards positive change. Speaking of which, earlier this week, council unanimously supported our mental health and addiction strategy. And we would love if both of you could offer some commentary on the city's plan and actions to enhance and provide better support for Calgarians who face addiction and mental health problems.
I'll just jump in right away. I think this is an amazing strategy we've put together. This is leadership. Mayor Nenshi, I believe it was 2018 when he originally brought this forward. And over the last few years, we've been working as a council, and I know Councillor Carra and I both supported it at that time. But this is a very leading initiative on mental health that Mayor Nenshi has led us to creating this mental health and addictions framework, which is a model of excellence to be duplicated, I think, across Canada and maybe North America. I think it's a tremendous great work under Dr. Chris Eagle, one of the chairs, and Karen Gosney is the other co-chair. A tremendous amount of work's gone in, and this is the start. With COVID is what's shown us that there were a lot of challenges when it comes to mental health and addictions prior to this. COVID, and as we move through COVID, we're going to be faced with many more. And I think we, with this strategy, are going to be able to help support Calgarians better than ever as we move forward. I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, I've got so much to say, it's crazy. I agree with everything George said. This is a world-leading for cities approach to mental health and addiction. And it's part of a three-legged stool that's really been over 10 years in the making. So when I was first elected, I've got the puppy going crazy here. When I was first elected, we were working on the 10-year plan to end homelessness. And we understood that housing and making sure that our most vulnerable have a safe place to live is the first step towards solving all of the issues that lead to homelessness. We quickly, early on in our term, said, it's not just about putting a roof over people's heads, it's also about addressing issues of poverty. And so we created the same kind of task force approach, and we developed the Enough for All strategy. And the Enough for All strategy, said a lot of things that are right in the wheelhouse of great neighborhoods and are really changing how the city's approaching its future, and are also, embedded in the guidebook for great communities. And so what the Enough for All strategy said is basically, people fall into poverty when their social networks become so threadbare that when they pick up the phone and need help, they've got very few people that they can call. And what we really want to do is we want to create dense community networks of institutions and neighbors and family, so that anytime you've got a problem, you've got a lot of people who can help, and you can help your neighbors. The other thing is we want to have one-stop shops of civil services that are located in community, so that anything you need, whether it's an access to a transit or recreation or services, mental health and addiction counseling, there's one place where you can go. And so the idea of the integrated civic facility, which is the center of the neighborhood, was also born, and is changing how we build civic facilities. And things like the Genesis Center being centers of community are really the beginning of that one-stop shop approach. So the final leg of that stool is really mental health and addiction. And in 2016 or 2017, the police came to us and they said, look, we're in an economic downturn. We're going to need $20 million more a year per budget. And I said, okay, we know that if you spend money on policing on the back end, if you spent it up front on preventative measures, you know, $3 to $5 million will save you $20 million on the back end. And council agreed when we gave the police $20 million extra that we would put $3 million into a preventative fund. And the next year in 2018, we're like, are we going to continue to invest in preventative services? And the mayor said, we got to be comprehensive about this. And that's when the mental health and addiction strategy was born. He's been working with the Bloomberg Group, and this is really a world-leading thing. So with those three legs of the stool, I think we're going to be able to take much, much better care of our most vulnerable, and that's going to save us a lot of, it's going to save a lot of misery, but it's also going to save us a lot of money and just build the city a better way.
And I think the one great thing about this initiative is they've reached out to many organizations throughout the city and our communities, and the culturally aware component of it that I've started to see as a part of this strategy, connecting with many of the communities that both of us represent, those ethno-cultural communities who have a challenge in accessing these services. And I think that's an important part of the strategy as well. And I think there's some really good initiatives of community organizations that are doing to help support that. But now it's about connecting those individuals to those right organizations as a part of the strategy.
I'd say a lot of the work you do on the Community Safety Task Force dovetails with this, and a lot of the work that we're talking about as we reallocate funding for police to alternative service delivery models, that's the way to go. I'll tell you quite frankly, I have a constituent, someone I know in communities, an East Calgary person, showed up at my door several weekends ago on a late on a Saturday night in crisis, and he knew where I lived, and he knocked on my door and said, I need help. And you know, who do you call at that moment in time? Like, I ended up calling some of the people I know and trust on the police, and they were able to help. But this is not a criminal matter. This is something that we need 24/7 service for, and this is what we're going to start to do it. So
I'm just gonna interrupt for a second.
We can just keep talking.
I know, and we have questions that you'll get a chance to sort of, you know, integrate where you guys are headed. So let's not skip ahead. But this, I'm gonna add some context maybe through another question that can help expand your responses. East Calgary is, as we know, the most diverse part of Calgary, which makes it culturally rich, but still it sometimes has a reputation, especially amongst people who are not living in those communities, that is negative. So how do we build an appreciation for the contributions of East Calgary throughout the rest of the city?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I mean, that's why I ran. That's why I'm here, and is to bring that advocacy and support and represent East Calgary with a strong voice on equity. I feel that traditionally East Calgary has been left out of many conversations when it comes to investment, when it comes to opportunities. And that's something that I've focused on and changing. And I know Giancarlo is committed to that as well. But you know, to have, and I keep going back to 78 top soccer fields in the city of Calgary, you know, A and B class fields, not one east of the Deerfoot in Northeast Calgary. I mean, 78 in the city, how does that happen? It shouldn't happen.
Maybe it's that they don't play soccer east of the Deerfoot.
Well, we didn't have any cricket pitches either before, so we went at Riley and now we're getting cricket pitches. So, you know what, I mean, I brought forward an administrative inquiry months and months ago, still waiting to hear from that, on equitable distribution of services throughout the city. There's the Deerfoot divide. Folks see us maybe a bit different. We're just like everybody else in the city. We have an amazing place. We've seen less arts and culture come back to Northeast Calgary and East Calgary, which that's going to change moving forward. When it comes to sports and rec as well, and many other opportunities. But I can tell you, you know, people ask me, you're Indian, you're South Asian, where do you eat? And I say, well, I can tell you 5 places in the Northeast. You know, where do you want to eat the best pho? I'll say East Calgary. where do you want, like everything from a culture and food perspective comes right to our communities. From International Avenue on 17th Avenue with the culture and the history there, moving northwards right into Ward 5 in the northern communities. There's so much culture, there's so much opportunity, but we do need better services and better opportunities for our residents to be able to access those services. So that's something I'm going to continue to work on and advocate for through everything I do moving forward. And I know Giancarlo feels the same way, and we're Batman and Robin on fighting this fight. I don't know who's Batman.
We're gonna have a big fight over who's Batman and who's Robin.
Over to you, I'd like to.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna push back on you when you say like East Calgary is just like everywhere else, and actually, I will challenge that. So in the early 2004, I was asked to lead a team of students and professors and people from across the University of Calgary to come into the communities of Greater Forest Lawn and work with the community associations and the International Avenue BRZ and really try and break the stalemate that had occurred in that area, because I agree, people were just sort of like, if it's east of the Deerfoot, it doesn't exist, it doesn't involve us. And our research really told a very interesting story, specifically for Greater Forest Lawn, but also for East Calgary. So the Forest Lawn was a town. It was a town that in 1961 agreed to be amalgamated into the city of Calgary, and they did so because they thought that was their best path to the future. And they signed over the papers, and they got their roads paved, and they got their sewage systems hooked up, they got off the septic tanks. But what also happened was the city put the Deerfoot down, and that created a real sort of barrier, divide, and the other thing that it did was it put a lot of the social housing projects of the era into the communities of Greater Forest Lawn. And so the original townies were sitting around and they see these, now we understand not best practice concentrations of poverty, and they started to develop this us versus them sort of story that they told themselves, like we never should have become part of the city of Calgary, because they had this sort of attitude of us versus them that is still sort of alive and is a sort of endearing trait of East Calgary today. But what our research showed was that there was other things happening. And one of the other things that was happening is that because the rents were low, the increasingly international immigration to Canada and specifically to Calgary started to put down roots in East Calgary. And so there was really a third group, and that was the incredible diversity of these communities that make it unlike anywhere else in the city of Calgary and make it really special. And when International Avenue was named International Avenue in 1993, we argue that that's one of the strengths of the city. It is the model. And so we said we need to build an avenue that people can walk safely on and bike on and get to and from where they need to go on high quality transit and still drive around. And we need to start to reinvest in our communities. And that's why council spent $180 million extending the Max Purple line, building out that avenue. For the first time, a generational reinvestment. And with people like George Chahal on council now, and with things like the guidebook saying we have to start reinvesting in the communities that have been paying taxes, and we have to reinvest in ways that make sense for those communities, whether it's...
Well, and I want to jump in on that. I mean, it's also knowing who lives in your communities. I mean, I think that's what you're getting to as well. A lot of those East Calgary residents, because of all those challenges, we as a city never knew as well as we do today and now who lives in our communities, where, and how do we engage with them better. So even with this the guidebooks process as we move forward, when we do get to these East Calgary communities and the Ward 5 communities where we have high concentration of ethnocultural communities, how do we communicate with them? How do we understand their needs and city building? And what does that look like? And I think that's been a huge transformation and a goal of mine to make sure all those voices are a part of that process. I can tell you one thing. I know in my ward, I bet you we have some of the highest number of business startups, because I know from my residents, they work their job, whatever they're doing, they're working hard, but they're trying to save enough money to start a business. And we see so many restaurants, so many great local business startups occur. I think that's pretty awesome. And we have still got a lot of work to do, but we're gonna keep working. My sleeves are rolled up and I'm ready to go.
Work that we need to do. We've already touched on this a little bit, but this is an opportunity for you to both to expand more specifically. Recently, we've seen quite a significant rise in hate crimes and gatherings like the anti-mask protests, which have sparked a lot of concern around aspects such as safety amongst Calgarians, especially racialized Calgarians. So we would like for you to address these ongoing issues and actions that are being taken, and maybe speak to some barriers that have been identified that prevent full inclusion, and what our plans are as council, to move forward in supporting the reduction of those barriers, but also what our members of our community can do.
Well, as I said earlier, when I was talking about systemic racism, we did an inquiry into systemic racism, and what we heard from Calgarians is that our BIPOC community, it doesn't matter what their age is, it doesn't matter what their background is, it doesn't matter what their education level is, and it doesn't matter what their socioeconomic circumstances. Our BIPOC community experiences a different and worse relationship with all of our institutions, and that has to change. And it began to change when people like George Chahal said, not everybody speaks English as their mother tongue, and they're living here, and they're entrepreneurs, and we are Canadians, and we are diverse, and we need to start serving people with the things they need in ways that they can understand and engage with us. And that's a big part of it. George and I were both placed on Calvary Police Commission, because one of the big things we heard, one of the big problems with our institutional relationships is with our police service. And everybody, we have a pretty good police service, but it is a product of its history, and we're in a moment of time where we can change history. We can start to deeply commit to the incredible project of pluralism that is Canada, the incredible pluralistic communities of East Calgary, and we can start to serve people where they are in the ways they need to be served, with the respect and dignity that every Canadian and every Calgarian expects, and unfortunately to date has not been served. So we are now actively shifting ourselves from just generally, well, we're Canadians, we're not racist, to we acknowledge the existence of systemic racism, and we are moving towards anti-racism. And what we're seeing as we do that is that there are people in our community who like things the way they are. And I always say that there are people, Calgarians are of three stripes at this moment in history. The people who understand that systemic racism is a thing and that we need to fix it. The people who do not understand that systemic racism is a thing and we need to educate them and bring them along and change our society. And the third group are people who, whether they understand it or not, are hell-bent on keeping things the way they are. And those people are rising up. And I think it's terrible, but I also think it's a sign that things are changing.
Yeah, and to add to that, diversity is our strength. I mean, this city, this country is built on the strength of our diversity of our communities and the people who built this country working together, and we have a lot of work to do. If we want to prosper moving forward, we have to include everybody, and that's to attract talent from around the world. We want to be that place where people feel safe and it's inclusive, and it's a great place to live and raise a family. Are we going to have challenges? Yes, we are. Every great city and nation does, but we do need to tackle the issues around racism. I mean, to see what happened over the last number of months in Edmonton with women of color who are Muslim being attacked because of the color of their skin, or seeing on the weekend here that a gentleman in a wheelchair being also punched by members of a protest using
A flagrantly white supremacist individual.
That just cannot be tolerated, cannot happen. And then we see on Sunday a young female in our community got attacked because she was wearing a hijab. So that is completely unacceptable, and that cannot happen, and we need to call it out. We talk about freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and I've said this before, they are a hallmark of our democracy, but freedom to hate is not. And that's where the line gets drawn. You cannot go out and put forward messages of hate to anybody in our community. We just cannot allow that as a city and as a society. And there's a lot of hard work that it comes to that. We all have to call it out when we see it. I've been on the other end of that growing up and recently as a city councillor even. But we have to tackle it head on and face on. And this is a big challenge we're going to face. And I want to mention that Giancarlo mentioned we're both on the police commission. I'm the chair of the public safety task force, which will be bringing forward a report on gun and gang violence and many of these issues in the upcoming next month that will address some of these issues we're facing. You know, the police service is doing with the tools they have the best they can, and they can do better in many ways and improve. And we're making sure on police commission that we are advocating for some of those reforms. They are a critical part of the prevention and intervention, and law enforcement is a critical part of that, but we all have to change. They're changing, and they've shown great leadership under the chief to initiate changes when it comes to systemic racism. They got an action plan and a strategic plan moving forward to do that, but we as a community have to buy in and stand united to call out racism as it exists.
And just to sort of just talk about some of the tangibles that have come to play, the city of Calgary has established an anti-racism office right in the city manager's office, and we're in the middle of a significant reorganization of the city and how we deliver services so they're more catered to individual communities. That's point 3 of Great Neighborhoods, by the way. And so anti-racism is starting to infuse that. We've established a official board of the city of Calgary in our anti-racism action committee that's populated, and they're getting their feet underneath them and they're weighing in. They most recently weighed in on the guidebook for great communities, saying how this is inherently an anti-racist approach to building the city. And the police have also established, not only does commission have an anti-racism committee that all members of commission sit on, but the police have established a citizen advisory board from the BIPOC community to also push them in all the directions we need to. So the work is now been joined, and I hope it's going to really up in front. People I think would be very comfortable to say, let's be anti-racist and go back to business as usual. But the whole point of all this work is to put that perspective on everything we do and to hear from members of the community and make appropriate change. So I expect to see significant changes on top of the money that we're pumping into it.
So a couple of days ago, Bethel from the Ward 10 office and myself were part of a really great community conversation with Detox. And we were talking about language and culture and how you can communicate with people even if you don't speak the same language, and different ways to do that. And art and music were two of the things that we discussed. I know Ward 9 has had quite a few opportunities for community engagement with art as a way of storytelling. And we had a question come through. Can Councillor Chahal speak to the public art in the Northeast survey that is currently open for input from residents in the Northeast? And there's some opportunity, I think, to piggyback also off of the different art programs that we have that are tied to community and culture.
Yeah, arts and culture is an extremely important part, I would say, of Northeast Calgary, as many other parts of the city. But we have so many cultures who celebrate their culture through the arts, through a celebration of singing and dancing and doing art in many different ways. And a big issue when I first got elected was the wishing well at the Genesis Center. This was a part of the construction of the project to bring this piece of artwork, which was a lovely piece of artwork until it burned a hole through an individual's jacket. And the art was actually interacting and attacking you. And that was a big issue. And so how do we deal with this massive, large piece of art? What do we do? Well, part of the commitment of building the Genesis Center and the city's policy was to invest a certain amount of dollars into the community from capital funds. For me, that art piece taken away means an investment was taken away from us. So what I've been advocating for, and through a notice of motion, is to bring that investment back to the community, but not the traditional way of putting maybe a big piece of art. Engaging with local artists, engaging with local community members. How's the best way to make our community more artistic? How can we show these great pieces of art in our community, large or small? And that's what we're working on right now, and that's that engagement piece you're seeing on what your views are and what you want to see moving forward. That investment from the wishing well that was taken away from us, that will be placed in another great location in the city, it's been a number of years, will be replaced with opportunities for local artists in our community, residents, communities to get involved on shaping that and bringing that art and culture right into the communities. And it might be through a bench or a seat, it might be through a painting, it might be through a mural. There's so many ways and creative ways we can incorporate it throughout our communities that will help show the great culture we have in Northeast Calgary.
Anything you want to add there, GC?
Well, I could talk about art for days. We just announced sort of our new approach to the public art process and unfreeze that, which is really good. One of the things that happened during the freeze in public art dollars was we still moved ahead with the public art program on International Avenue. And so International Avenue was not only a build out of the avenue with transit and walkable infrastructure and beautiful trees and shrubbery and all of that. But it also is a celebration of the diverse cultures. Since we have a series of art pieces that have emerged and are emerging along International Avenue that are sourced from local community-based artists in East Calgary, which I'm super excited about. The other thing that's really exciting is we're starting to work with our ethnocultural communities to populate International Avenue as a celebration of international communities. And so the first one that's getting off the ground is the Vietnamese community has raised a beautiful project, and we're placing it at the gateway to International Avenue on the west end, right when you come up the hill, and it's a celebration of and a memorial to the boat people, which you know, that refugee influx brought us so many of our incredible Vietnamese community. George and I are now starting to work with the Filipino community to similarly recognize them. And so I think we've got beautiful pieces of public art. We've got a new way to do that, to focus it on local artists. And now we're working with our ethnocultural communities to really celebrate their contributions and memorialize their cultures along International Avenue and other parts of East Calgary.
Just to add to that, I think this is a great way to bring everybody together, young and old, youth in our community with their artistic ideas. In our Ward 5 brochure, we had a little art coloring page, and we had great young members of our community color that and send that back. That was pretty cool. Also seniors in our community to participate in what they want to see from art and whether they want to participate in it or whether their ideas. My own personal artistic, I'm not artistic when it comes to maybe drawing or writing. My art happens on the ice rink or on the ball hockey rink. So what I'd like to see is maybe like the bounce courts at the Genesis Center outside that we have in downtown Calgary, be able to create a space like that outdoors with a beautiful artistic mural, and kids can see it, view it, enjoy it, and also maybe shoot some hoops while they're doing that. So I think I guess my point is we all perceive and see art in a different way of what we enjoy, and let's get all those exciting pieces out from our community.
I want to do just a little bit of bragging as another sort of shout out to East Calgary. Over the course of the last 10 years, we celebrated Dover community's 50th anniversary. We celebrated Dover's 55th anniversary and Ogden's 50th anniversary. And what we did was we went into the community and we got all the sixth graders in the community, and I went in and sort of talked to them about neighborhoods. And we had a woman named Stacy Watson, who's a professor of photography at the University of Lethbridge, come in and talk about photography. We distributed cameras to every kid. They shot the works. And then we processed the film, and they curated their favorite shot, talking about their neighborhood and what it meant to them. And we've had 3 exhibitions. So if you've got a 50th coming up for your community, we want to celebrate it by having the youth in your community do it. This is my neighborhood photo exhibition.
And, you know, just to point out, because of COVID, which is the next sort of theme of our questions, because we're going to move on. It was a great conversation, but we have lots of other questions. We missed, an in-person celebration of Albert Park, Radisson Heights 50th anniversary.
That broke my heart. That broke my heart.
So we've got to do a lot of catching up on celebrations.
And I just want to say a highlight of my first term is being at the Saddle Ridge community 50th a few years back. That's the community I grew up in, and I spent a lot of time probably causing grief for many of those community volunteers at that time. But it was great to see so many old community faces come out from the last 50 years of Saddle Ridge. So
nobody thought you turned out so well, George.
Speaking of things that turn 50, vaccines. People in between the ages of 50 and 64 and above 65, depending on which vaccine they were eligible for, were able to get vaccinated in the recent past. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on the role that the city can play in our grand mission to get everybody vaccinated and move along from COVID. So
I just want to note that Shifra, before she became like a political machine and a civic engagement machine, she's a nurse. So she loves, anytime we get into the medical sphere, she's all about that.
Yes, I have many interests.
This is for me, this is the most important topic. This is all important, but today, right now, this is my focus moving forward. It has been over the last year as we've been in the pandemic and the hailstorm. It's consumed all of my energy and time, and it will continue to do so. What I'm just going to say is it's simple. We need to get our economy back. We can gather with our friends and family. When it's your turn, get vaccinated with whichever vaccine is available to you. We cannot let our guard down. We still have a lot of work to do. Representing the upper Northeast Calgary, being a South Asian, being identified by some political leaders that some of the issues come from some of these communities is extremely unfortunate. And we do have many ethnocultural communities. We have a lot of frontline workers. We have people working in grocery stores, in the trucking industry, distribution centers, meat plants, livery, that's taxi industry.
Yeah,
every job.
What livery means.
Yeah, every job that happens in our city that's kept our city going. Members of our community have not had the luxury for being able to work from home. They go to work every day. Their kids go to school. Many of these folks live in multi-generational families. So by going to work in a hospital as a nurse, coming home, you put your family also at risk, but they do it for the betterment of our community. So we got to work together. Everybody in East Calgary, we have to work together. If you could help out a senior to get vaccination bookings, somebody you know, reach out to them and ask them. You're going to see a lot more work coming from our office, from the Ward 5 office, because this is the most important part for me moving forward, is to make sure everybody in our community gets vaccinated, we get them the right information. We've created 7 multilingual videos, which we'll be releasing this later this week and early next week on our website. And we also have a lot of signage, billboards, mail-outs coming out. So I'll give some more information on some additional work we're doing on public engagement on this as well. I do want to turn it over to Giancarlo to talk a little bit about the importance of vaccines and some of the work as the chair of the Emergency Management Committee and the role of maybe SEMA, the East Calgary Town Partnership. Maybe if you'd like to shed some additional information.
I will say that something that we all have to keep front and center in our minds is that COVID-19 right now on a day-to-day basis is the #1 killer of human beings on the planet Earth. And this is in spite of the fact that the entire world has collectively and globally taken a pretty serious and regular life interrupting response to controlling this thing. So you can only imagine what would have happened and what would be happening if we had not globally worked together. The other global thing that we did was scientists from around the globe came together and we cranked out a vaccine for this thing in under a year. And that is a triumph of science and collective action. And I think that all needs to be celebrated, and we all have to do our part. And our part has been, for those of us who can and are required to stay at home, this is one of the first times I've been actually proximate to other people in a long time, and it feels good. But we also, reduce the spread, do your part, and then what George said, absolutely, is get vaccinated. The city has been very proactive in terms of that. We declared a state of local emergency. I've signed that several times with Mayor Nenshi. We had a big conversation about, what we've discovered. We've got a really world-class emergency management agency overseen by Provincial Emergency Management Act. We thought we were the best in the business, and in many ways we are and have been. But what the global pandemic has taught us is that we're not as prepared and as well integrated with provincial law when it comes to a pandemic. So a lot of what the city has done throughout this is, continue to provide essential services, work with the local business community, work with our vulnerable populations, and plan for how we get out the other side of this as intact as possible. And right now, we're setting up vaccination center. The Genesis Center is one of our first mass vaccination centers. Just at the beginning of April, we're going to be rolling out at the Telus Convention Center downtown. And one of the things that our emergency management agency is wicked good at is logistics and making sure. So the big problem we've had is that there aren't enough vaccines to go into arms. That's going to flip very quickly. And the big challenge we're going to have is too many vaccines, and we need to get them into arms. And that's why we've rolled out these mass vaccination centers. So I think that's going to help us get back to normal life as soon as possible. But I encourage everybody to realize.
Izzy is also encouraging everybody. Yes.
You're really upset. Okay, the point is, it's incredible how Calgarians have come together. It's disheartening how some members of our community aren't supportive of this incredible collective action that have kept so many of us safe while we've kept things going. I cannot wait for a return to normalcy, and doing your part by getting vaccinated is one of the most essential steps all of us can do.
And you know what, I'm just gonna say, follow public health guidelines. You know what, wear one of these over your nose, wash your hands, stay 6 feet apart. I mean, those are some of the basics we all can do while we move forward. Once we get vaccinated, we're not sure what the future looks like. You may still have to wear a mask. You may still have to maintain physical distance, but we can get to normal if we all get vaccinated. A big thing for me was getting that mass vaccination center at the Genesis Center. I know Mayor Nenshi, I've been talking to him for months on this, and I appreciate the hard work of Deputy Chief Henry to making this happen.
Chief Henry now.
Sorry, Chief Henry, my apologies. Chief Henry for making this happen. That's been a long road and a great team effort. And going through that facility, it was seamless. You were showing up, you were getting in through our tour, getting vaccinated, and the smiles on so many faces put a big smile on my face. So when it's your turn, book your appointment, get vaccinated with whichever vaccine's available. We have 5 times as many vaccines per Canadian. We have a lot of vaccines, so just get vaccinated quick as you can.
And take a selfie after, so
Sure.
that all your friends.
I'm probably gonna be closer to the back of the line, maybe in June or July, whenever my turn comes. I'm gonna get vaccinated. I do wanna say on April 7th, we are having another town hall with Chief Henry and another, I wasn't actually supposed to say Chief Henry because she was a special surprise guest, but I've already said that. And another special guest and a few others on April 7th at 7 p.m. There'll be a virtual town hall, and you can connect with us to listen in on, it's all about vaccines and other questions you may have on public health at ward05@calgary.ca or at georgechahal.ca. You can reach out to us.
I'm getting the no for
I'm
sure,
getting
but
all
I do want to tell you that you have to follow the public health orders, and while the vaccines are ramping up, we're also getting this third wave that's
The
coming
new
at us.
variants that are
New
rising.
variants, and I expect that we are going to see some restrictions tightening up in the weeks and months ahead to get this under control and to let the vaccines do their job.
And don't throw these on the street, please. I pick up way too many.
So the reason I'm trying to move y'all along is because we have more COVID-related questions
Awesome,
to
sorry.
answer. One of the things that came up repeatedly in a lot of our submitted questions were supports for small business and entrepreneurs. But before we get into that, I also would love if the both of you could tag team on another project that you've technically collaborated on, and that is the Livery Bylaw. That was recent, and you could speak to that and then maybe flow into some of the things that we're doing to support small business in Calgary.
So, Giancarlo's the chair of the committee. I'll just talk. The Livery Bylaws, livery is taxi, the taxi industry, the limousine industry, the TNCs. We created a whole new bylaw. My focus has been, as many of my constituents are taxi drivers. I've been focused on not just the taxi drivers, on the TNC drivers, the drivers, that they get a fair opportunity to work and provide for themselves and to earn a living. And this is even before COVID, we're having all these challenges. So a lot of work's been done, and we've driven down the costs of the industry, driven down the costs of Giancarlo 2 years in a row. Last year, we were the only municipality in Canada to give a break, to waive driver's fees, reduce plate owner fees for that industry, and we did it again this year. And I think that's a great leadership by our council to do that. And then next year, you'll see further changes coming to the bylaw itself, and I'll let you talk a little bit more about some other changes that may have been brought forward.
Well, I mean, I think George has been such a champion for the, you're pointing at it there, but the camera's on.
Well, our camera guy seems to be.
No, I think the camera loves George, doesn't need to see me. The one thing I'll note that's been very difficult is that we have the taxi cab industry, which has been traditionally regulated by the city of Calgary here in Calgary, and traditionally has fallen into municipal government's hands to regulate. And the reason is that taxi industry is a very difficult thing to make work. And it's the kind of marketplace that only works if it's well regulated. And we started years ago to really try and sort of take this industry out of the stone age of regulation, where we had, a couple of major companies basically controlling all of the plates, and really try and get it back into the hands of the drivers, and really recognize that people's careers were on the line. And as we were doing this work, we got hit by the TNCs, which is transportation network companies, and that's sort of like Uber and Lyft and the others. And these guys are bringing basically a technology-based approach to regulating the industry. But the shift is you go from having drivers who have a career as drivers to gig workers who are very, very part-time. And part of the reason why the TNCs are undercutting the traditional cab companies is because you're relying on drivers to use their cars and wear their cars out, and not actually sort of handle the wear and tear on that. And so it's been a terrible struggle and a terrible fight. On the plus side, the TNC technology has forced the taxi cab industry to innovate a bit more. But on the negative side, we see a real transition of people's livelihoods and their investments being wiped out by these really predatory international multinationals. And so I think the fact that we brought a livery bylaw forward, and in the past, if we had a livery situation, there would be dozens and dozens and dozens of angry seekers. Everyone was kind of like, you know what, you listen to us, you're driving the cost down, you're making it fair, who pays for what. And so I think on the whole, in a very difficult moment in history, the city has done good work on this, but my heart goes out to these essential workers who are in a situation where literally the sands are shifting. And
I just want to, there's still a few, as far as I'm concerned, unresolved issues that we'll be tackling in the future, which I'm not going to give up on, that are public safety related. We know that taxi and limo have cameras in their cars. We know that the TNCs don't. Everybody's got a camera on one of these. You can do an app, you can do a camera. I don't know why one can't and one can. That's a conversation for public safety, I think, is important, and it makes fairness in the playing field. Also on, having an opportunity, other cities have brought caps in on TNCs. The taxi industry has a cap, TNCs don't. We've seen other big cities globally do that. Those are future conversations as this evolves. The other big issue when it comes to wages and the work people are doing, and how they're getting compensated and paid. And that's a big concern. We've seen stuff internationally now that is challenging some of the benefits being provided to these individuals working in the TNCs. I do want to say, we talk about supporting local. I want to support all my drivers in both industries. They do great work. They're all working hard, and some work in both industries. Cut the profits, as Giancarlo mentioned, on the one side, and I'll say on the TNC side. Do not stay here in Calgary or Canada. They go overseas. They're going to San Francisco or the Netherlands. And I think that's an important distinction of who you should be supporting from a business perspective. I want to support the drivers of both industries, but where do those profits go? So we have to stand up and advocate and fight for those drivers. If their monies are going offshore, those profits, then they get better benefits and they get better wages while they're working here.
That's a really good thing to note, and thank you both for explaining that, because I think that is a question and an industry that a lot of people find serious if they are not directly involved. Okay, so as promised, we are now, that kind of wraps up all of our thematic questions that came in from registration, and we're going to move into some audience questions, and we've got a ton. And we'll start by talking about Ward 10 specifically, because part of the reason why we're doing this together is that the both of you are filling in and taking the responsibility for Ward 10 communities since Councillor Jones retired. So can you both talk about some discoveries, some top discoveries that you've made in Ward 10, things that are interesting to you, that you want to highlight as part of the community now that you are more involved with that?
Well, I want to begin with the great communities and community associations. I've had an opportunity to meet with majority of them, and I'm once again honored to be able to represent the communities I've grown up playing street hockey in Rundle or on the ice in Whitehorn, and playing ice hockey with so many in the properties and PSA and NASA. We have a very diverse community in Ward 10, and I think very similar to Ward 9 and Ward 5, and there's subtle differences. But the challenges, I think, from what I've seen from a public safety perspective, are the same. There's, members of our communities want more investment when it comes to public safety, whether it's on our in and around our train stations, our LRT stations. I get the same comments in the Ward 5. I hear that in Rundle and folks in Marlborough as well. So those are some of the similarities, but I've also heard that they want better engagement and more opportunities to do this. We did an invite in the fall, and we had a lot of Ward 10ers come out and chat with us as well, which was awesome. And we're doing this tonight, and over 100 people on a weeknight to listen to both of us, I think is really good at seeing the level of engagement that's been wanted by Ward 10 residents. And we're here to help and support you in any way we can. We have an amazing staff, Bethel and Mohammed, to be the day-to-day and bring up those issues to us as well. Giancarlo?
Yeah, it's hard for me to talk about discoveries because in one sense I have spent so much of my life with Ward 10 communities deeply embedded in my daily grind. And when I go to the movies during the regular times, I go to Sandwich, right?
Yeah.
And I shop. I'm for some reason I'm a Lowe's guy right across the street from there. And my Costco for years was the
32nd,
and then the Pacific Place Mall and a lot of the restaurants, and there was the movie dome that I went to for years.
Oh my God, I love the movie dome.
And so I think I'm not surprised by the communities of Ward 10, but also Village Square. That's where I took my son and spent a lot of time swimming.
The wave pool.
Yeah, the wave pool. I can tell you I've got some great video of him as a tiny little guy splashing in those waves. Ward 10 doesn't surprise me. What I really need is to hear from everybody. What we need to hear is from everybody. We understand that there hasn't been this kind of engagement in a long time in Ward 10 communities, and what we want to do is we want to hear from you. We want to discover what your issues are and what your needs are. I'll just note I got a note saying what happened to the on my phone saying, what happened to the skate park that Ray Jones promised for the dry pond? I don't know about that, so contact.
Which dry pond?
I don't know.
Well, we got a skate park at Saddletown now, so if you wanna come skateboard, come to Saddletown.
I suspect this is a Marlboro issue, because they also said, wait a minute, about the disc golf course.
Yeah.
We thought this was a temporary disc golf course. Is this permanent? No, the beautiful thing about disc golf is that you can lay it out, you can play it for a while, and you can make it increasingly permanent as you want, or if it's not working, you can move it on to other things. So this is a trial run. I'm sorry to give anyone the vapors about thinking this was an imposition that was, but I suspect once it's in, you're gonna love it. I play disc golf in the Forest Lawn course, right by the tennis courts there on 52nd all the time, and it's amazing. It's a great way to spend some time outside for all ages and abilities.
One thing I have noticed is when I look at the older industrial areas, and I work at the McDonald's on 32nd Avenue, the Horizon McDonald's at 32nd and Barlow. We don't have a great pathway system, even those are industrial areas. We talk about, and I'll just touch on right on 37th next to the Tim Hortons, there's the old Lakeview Winds that is now being purchased by Silvera. They've been announced to receive funding from the federal government through the Rapid Housing Initiative for seniors assisted living. I think that's really a great opportunity to transform that underutilized hotel into a seniors assisted living facility. We don't have enough of that in East Calgary, so I think that will help support many of our seniors. But a part of that conversation is the connectivity to Whitehorn train station.
Okay, so
There's
I'm
no-
gonna.
I gotta jump in. We have talked about the A5 network, but something.
I'm going to ask a Susie question about that.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry, I know, I just don't wanna miss it. So people are right there with you. We have one question that asks specifically about making roads like 52nd and Memorial that are really wide with really small sidewalks that feel like they disconnect communities. What are our plans to connect them better? And then another question that talks about the Calvary Greenway. Is the Calvary Greenway path going to be connected to more neighborhoods? It's great for biking, but very short and only runs from Coral Springs southward. So lots of interest in this question. Maybe you can provide some context to those areas specifically.
Well, you go ahead.
No, well, I'll just say really quickly, we do need an A5 map for every ward. Ward 9 has produced the prototype. We're doing a recreation map. But one of the things that we're working on that's specific to Ward 10 is that you've got an armature of CP rail tracks that come up from Nose Creek and spread their way into the Franklin area. And the CP rail, we're currently working with them about buying strategic components of that so that they become pathways. And then we don't want to buy all of it, but we want to make sure that the point of sale, when the CP rail disposes of them, allows for an easement so the city can put a pathway in, which will help whoever purchases that property and will also help network connectivity in the area. So I think there is an A5 network strategy. We have to look at what we have. We have to start looking at the things that we need to connect everything, and then we have to start banging off those projects. We've been doing that in Ward 9 for several years now, and we've got a great inventory of additions that are either recently constructed or are on the books for construction in the next year. But there's so many more to do, and every ward in the city needs that.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on that. I mean, if you look at Memorial Drive, it's wide. It's so wide. I just thinking of from going 52nd to 36th Street, for instance. There's a lot of opportunity there. The biggest challenge, and I touched on it earlier, is the lack of connectivity on our pathway system with the Deerfoot Divide and coming across. So if you're in Ward 5 and you want to go westward, you have run into barrier after barrier. Also in the Ward 10 communities, there's great opportunities that we can build better connections because I know as a kid growing up, I was on my bike most of the time. I see seniors walking those paths and cycling as well. And you know what? That's something I think we can do from a connectivity, with both of us here to have a good look at that and see where can we take immediate action. On the Greenway, on the Mattamy Greenway, that is something we also need to focus on and expand as well and finish off because it is critical to the whole connection around the city.
Let-
And that once again integrates in all those pathways.
Let me jump in there. I will brag a little bit. The transit line for the Max Purple that we bridged the Bow River and Deerfoot and the irrigation canal and took you up. It has a multi-use path that really creates that east-west connection in an unbelievable way. This summer, all along 19th Avenue, which runs parallel on the south side to International Avenue, from where the multi-use path on the bridge lets you off into the neighborhood. On 19th, we're gonna have a multi-use path rebuilt into 19th Avenue all the way to 52nd. 52nd is gonna get a multi-use path. The Greenway is gonna be continued down to the south, and we're gonna start punching holes like in Abbeydale, where there's this chain link fence, and you can see the Greenway, but you can't get there. We are gonna be extending Memorial Drive in the years ahead. But the big fight right now is, do we go up and over the CN or do we allow a level crossing? And so our fight right now is to say we want a level crossing, and as soon as we get CN's allowance for that one for Memorial Drive, long before we build Memorial Drive, we're gonna run a pathway along Memorial Drive right away, connecting the communities.
I just want to add one thing. We don't have large regional parks in East Calgary. Prairie Winds is a gem in Ward 5, and a lot of the residents come there, but
Valley View and Dover.
But there's massive gaps in between. And so we do need, and I know the upper northeast corner, an opportunity to have that, and we have to look at more opportunities on the Ward 10 and some of the new communities that will develop.
That's another thing the Guidebook for Great Communities does, is when you do your local area planning, you acknowledge that there aren't necessary regional parks. You start putting the plans in place, which drives the investment.
Well, again, thank you so much for skipping ahead, the two of you. It's like you're in the minds of our citizens, which is, I guess what you want out of a city councillor. There's a question that I think a lot of people are wondering about in terms of walkable communities. And so this person asks, both of you seem to be in favor of walkable communities. You also seem to want to reduce city sprawl. Jeff. I'm having trouble reconciling this with your vote to approve 14 new communities in July 2018. This was a much larger expansion than administration had recommended. Did I get that right? Can you explain the rationale of your vote?
Well, you want me to start? You want to start?
I would love to. If you want to go, you go, but I've got lots to say.
Okay,
so why don't you say a little? I'll say a little, and if you want to add more, go.
Okay.
You got 5 minutes.
Okay, well, you know what? For decades, what we've done is we've taken the taxes out of the city that exists, we've subsidized growth on the edge, we built a city that we can afford less and less. When I was elected in 2010, I was elected under a Great Neighborhoods banner alongside a mayor who clearly said that growth has to cover its own costs. We started to do the work to figure out whether growth covered its own costs or not. And what we discovered was that no, in fact, growth was deeply subsidized decade after decade after decade. Every new home on the edge of the city was subsidized by the existing tax base to the tune of $5,000 to $20,000 a unit. And this was a fact that was forensically audited, that was agreed upon by both the city and the development industry who audited the books together. The 2013 election was an election about whether we were going to do anything about it. And the development industry, who had become billionaires, absorbing big chunks of that subsidy, certainly tried to take our mayor down, take myself. They figured the mayor was unbeatable, so they wanted to take out people on council who would support the mayor, and they were unsuccessful in doing that, and the good guys won. So 2013 to 2017 was a conversation with industry about how do we get growth to pay for itself. And what we discovered over that course of that period was that, in fact, for all its deep pockets, the development industry needs public investment in order to start growth, either on the edge of the city or in the established areas. And so the conversation we then had was, instead of mindlessly subsidizing growth, let's have a thoughtful conversation about investing in growth. And we want to make sure that when we invest in growth, it's a public conversation. It doesn't happen in the back room. We look at the investment portfolio and we make thoughtful choices. In 2018, we were in rough shape economically, and what had happened in the 1980s When the bottom dropped out of the oil industry, is that the bottom also dropped out of the real estate industry. And council was laser focused on making sure that we didn't see that cross-sectoral carnage as the city was on the ropes. And so what we said is, you know, we've got a recommendation for 6 business cases. There's another 5 that are not recommended. But if we do all 5, we will keep the industry afloat, and it's not that big a deal. It's a much less of a hit than we've been taking decade after decade, year after year, mindlessly subsidizing. And we're being thoughtful about this. And what we committed to was every 20 years, we'll review new business cases. And the business cases came forward in 2020, and we said no, because we did 11 as opposed to 6 the last time around, and we haven't seen the return on investment. We're not going to do that yet. And so the fact that we're talking about this at all is a very good thing. And then just from a real politics perspective, there are, you know, roughly 11 suburban councillors and 3 or 4 inner city councillors. And if we don't start driving reinvestment back in, we're in trouble. And the only way to get there is to work with our majority counterparts. And so I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah,
Now, my rationale is the system's working, and the fact that people are mad about it and stop any further mindless expansion in 2020 is a good thing. And the thoughtful economic decision we made at that point in time was fine.
So I'll agree with, I think you did a pretty good overview on everything. We both did vote against the last run of them in 2020 because it didn't make sense. And you know what? I represent Northeast Calgary. We have some of the fastest growth. One community got approved over there. That was the ASP was approved before I got elected. We had to, it was moving forward, and we had to find ways to service it. But a part of this was that the cost to city infrastructure, also using the pipe we've already put in the ground, to getting the most efficiency of the network we already have in place, so that we get a return on the investment we've already made. And there was a set criteria. The time was different. We wanted to support our local economy as well and fight that right balance. I can tell you, Skyview Ranch is one of, from an MVP as a complete community.
Municipal development plan.
Yeah, the municipal development plan. It hits all the targets. It actually has some of the highest densities for a suburban community, and it outperforms many of our inner city communities.
It's way denser than Inglewood and Ramsey.
So there you go. So we're on the edge. We brought the density. We've also made a commitment to bringing services to these communities. They bought into these communities with higher density, walkable communities, to have those opportunities. We have the pods, the pedestrian-oriented development with the pods, the transit-oriented development, and what we're missing is the T, the transit part of it. But we're going to make that happen very soon as well, as we have 60th Street. So it is a balancing act, supporting our local economy, supporting supply and demand as we move forward. And I'll stand by the decision we made then, because we made it with the best information on hand. And I also stand by voting against all the communities in 2020 because we did the same thing.
And the fact that we're talking about is great. The only other thing I want to hit again is that the city of Calgary, even in our lowest growth years, is growing by thousands. We grew by what, 3% over COVID, over 2020. People are flooding into our country, or into our city from around the province, around the country, around the world. We are a growing city, and we have to accommodate that growth in a way that makes sense. And one of the ways that will absolutely make sense is to start to grow up. But we're putting those systems in place, and that's what the Guidebook for Great Communities does. And until we get that over the line and get the public investments flowing into established areas to build the transit, the parks, the pipes under the ground, the main streets that are needed, we're not going to see ourselves be able to accommodate that growth in the established area in a way that the market can respond to, in a way that developers can build, in a way that people who are living in those neighborhoods are willing to see. And so we've got a lag as we grow, and we need to grow, continue to accommodate some of that growth on the edge. And when we got both systems up and running, and it's an apples to apples conversation, I think you'll see a lot more growth occur in the inner city, but we have to get there, and we're not getting there without council support, and we're never going to get there if we turn this into an us versus them, edge versus center, suburban versus urban battle, because we lose. The established areas lose if that's the fight we're fighting.
Okay, You only went 1.5 minutes over, and
Not
so
bad.
knowing that we have a lot of really good questions, I'm just going to take this opportunity
Rapid
a
fire.
little bit earlier to let folks know that we might go a few minutes over. So I'll just pepper in some of the closing details and we'll continue this conversation. We have a lot of really good questions. We're not going to get to all of them, but we are going to try and email you back and cluster some of the other questions in our wrap up and after event emails. So be patient with us, and we are going to continue this great conversation for now. So our next question is around, actually we've got a couple of questions around schools. So one person asks, can you kindly touch on the notion that the CBE designated schools for deep northeast communities are far from the communities the kids actually live in? I know they're very far away. Does council have input on this type of concern? Happy to get in touch to chat further offline as well. And then we have another person who asks, can you comment about the provincial government's removal of the IB program?
I'll jump on both.
And then I'll follow up with a bigger picture conversation,
So,
jump on both of those.
Look, I grew up in Saddlebridge. I rode the school bus for 12 years. That yellow school bus that didn't make it on time, didn't show up some days. I understand the frustrations and challenges of residents in Northeast Calgary. We're the fastest growing part of the city, and what the city's responsibility is to plan the land. Anytime a developer comes forward, we make sure the school sites, where they're located in those locations, and then we transfer them over so the school boards can start their planning. We have all those sites in place. I have good news that if you're in Cornerstone, I mean, it's not, the planning commission recently reviewed a site in Cornerstone for a new high school on Country Hills. It still has to come to council, still has to go through public hearing. That's really good news though, because that means that's advancing forward. That school is also on the planning, on the CBE's, Calgary Board of Education's 3-year planning cycle. So what we gotta do, once city council looks at it and we have our public hearing, if it gets approved, that land use to move forward, we need to, all of us, to advocate together, to contact our MLAs, to contact our public school trustees and say, we need this school built, and that's a high school. And we need that high school because Nelson Mandela's at like 120% capacity. We have the fastest growing communities in the city in Northeast Calgary. Redstone needs a school, same situation there, and Skyview Ranch has a new school coming as well as one in Saddlebridge. In the next year or two, we'll be starting construction, I think later this year in the Skyview one. On the ID program, this is a huge challenge. Lester B. Pearson had an ID program.
That's international baccalaureate. It's one of the best education systems on the planet.
So we got 2 schools in Northeast Calgary, 2 high schools, Lester B. Pearson and Nelson Mandela. Taking away this ID program from Northeast Calgary students is mind-boggling. In my opinion, why CBE would want to do this. We want our kids to go to our local schools close to home. We have a lot of kids who want to be a part of that ID program. To shove them away to go to maybe Sir Winston Churchill or to Western or somewhere else in the city makes absolute no sense. When we talk about equity and opportunity, why is this opportunity being taken away from Northeast Calgary students? I'm not happy about it once I heard about it, and this discussion is not going to end here today. I can tell you that. We will be having further conversations with our CDP representatives and members of the provincial government to take a look at this. If anything, they should be expanding these programs into, from Pearson to Nelson Mandela, or the new high school that's going to be built in Cornerstone in the future. Those are some of my comments. Giancarlo, I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, well, a larger picture consideration is that great neighborhoods make a great city, and the heart of a great neighborhood is its school. And the problem that we have as a city building organization, as the city government of Calgary, is that we don't have control over that heart, except for, as George mentioned, setting aside land as we build the city. And so
I just want to add one thing, and you can touch on this. What percentage do we pay to the provincial government in an education property?
I'm getting
Okay.
there. So for every dollar of property tax that the city collects, roughly 40 cents on the dollar, gets requisitioned 6 months later from the city coffers to the province. It used to be called the education tax. It was intended to fund our education system, but it sort of over the years got just thrown into general revenue. And the reality is that, like so many things in the city of Calgary, the taxes we pay never come back to us. We also have a signed memorandum of understanding with the school board that says the age of building single-use, publicly owned facilities, a school, a library, a seniors facility, a fire hall, a police station, those days are over. We can't take a valuable piece of land in the heart of our communities and just build one thing. And we actually signed a memorandum of understanding with the school board saying that we will no longer also build single-use schools. We've yet to fulfill that promise working with the school boards. And the school board, like when we talk about not being able to afford a city that constantly sprawls outward, the schools are one of the cautionary tales. We know that it not only costs so much money to supply, every community has a school set aside. The school board is not getting enough money to actually put the schools in place. And if we're not building complete communities, what we get are life cycle communities where everyone moves in at the same age. They all have kids at the same age. The school is packed for like 10, 20 years. And then for the next 40 years, all the kids move away because there's no room in them for them in the community. There's no different kind of housing type. And the school sits empty. And then we have to bus kids in from other schools, from other communities that don't have their own schools to fill that. That's one of the reasons why we need to build complete communities. And we need to make our schools multifunctional, multi-use. I fundamentally believe that we should actually put the physical infrastructure of schools into the hands of the city.
Yes.
And they should be integrated civic facilities, and the school board should just be a client that comes and goes as required to these otherwise multifunctional buildings.
Giancarlo, the system's broken.
It's broken.
It's broken.
It's broken.
And you know what? I hear it all the time, and one thing I do not like saying to our residents is, it's not my responsibility.
I hate
You know
that.
what? I hate that. I'm an elected official. It is my responsibility to advocate on your behalf. But they hold the power and the money to make those decisions happen. And this is where, if we do not unite and be strong together in our advocacy positions, the IB programs get taken away. Our students in Northeast Calgary are no less than any other student in the city. They have the same dreams and aspirations. So let them pursue them. And if that means they want to join an IB program in Lester B. Pearson or Nelson Mandela, let them. Let's not take that away from them.
Okay, I have one other thing to add, and that is that all of that land that's set aside for school boards is undertaken and overseen by something called the Joint Use Coordinating Committee, which is this crazy committee that sits out of arm's reach from the elected officials and the school board itself, and they manage school lands and municipal reserve lands. And that's another broken part of the system. I'm happy to report that we are overhauling historically the JUCC program, and it's going to, the new system that we put in place is going to put us a lot closer to that. Manitoba right now is disbanding their elected school boards, and they're starting to change things. So change is possible. We're watching that with interest. But if we're not, as a city building, as a neighborhood focused, it's a great community focused organization, if we don't have the ability to make our schools the heart of our great communities, we're building things without a beating heart.
Final. I gotta say this. They built Nelson Mandela High School without a gym and a field on a slope with a bunch of rocks in the back. That's why we had to bring forward a notice of motion to fix the Genesis Center fields. How do you build a high school without a gym? How do you build it without a proper field?
That's systemic racism.
So
that's systemic racism.
Well, that's why I ran, and that's what I ran on, to fix that problem.
Well, congratulations on getting that field bill. All right. Shifra, come on, you're dropping the ball here.
Okay, actually, I was gonna make a really funny joke. I was gonna say, yeah, we're gonna fix the broken jukebox, get a JUCC, and then it just flopped because y'all went on.
We're passionate about this.
That's fine. Okay, well, we've got another
That was
question.
hilarious, Shifra.
Thank you. It's very fun. I'm a very fun person. Okay, so next question. Will the religious institutions be getting an exemption or an exemption to the noise bylaw in the city? And we're gonna
We're talking about the AVPA.
Yeah, so just quickly, it's
religious institutions, so I think you're talking about noise on
Noise
religious events?
Yes, noise
Okay.
exemption.
I can touch on that. So last year, I mean, because of COVID, we were able to work with our bylaw to look at our bylaw to exempt certain religious organizations the opportunity to have the ability, for instance, in the Muslim community during Ramadan, they have the adhan, which is a very important part of their community. They're called the prayer. And we were able to work with them to find a way that they could do that, which was, I think, a very important message that the community was able to convey to their congregation. And we're hoping to do that again this year, while respecting our neighborhoods and making sure that the noise levels fall into line, that neighbors aren't disturbed as well. But that's something that we are working on again this year. You know, I did work with bylaw last year, and we were able to get it done. And we are asking for a similar exemption for this year for the upcoming month of Ramadan. And Ramadan Mubarak to everybody in the Muslim community in the upcoming days when we'll start Ramadan.
Thank you for that, George. So just to be cognizant of time, you know, we promised people we would be done at 9. We're gonna go over. So I'm just gonna plug 311 right now. We've had quite a few questions in the submission chat around, you know, I'm looking to address this very specific problem in this very specific area. And a lot of the times our responses from the office is around asking whether you've contacted 311 or not. So at this point, we're going to plug contacting 311, and then we've got some questions about 311.
Okay, do you want me, I'll give an overview of 311. The 311 has sort of two sort of narratives going on around it. One is that it's this unbelievable one-stop shop intake that creates this integrated paper trail and course of action. And then the other sort of criticisms that you hear about 311 is that it's basically created this barrier. And back in the day, you used to be able to pick up the phone and call someone at City Hall and get them on the phone and be like, I need this done. The problem with that system is that while it was very gratifying to pick up the phone and actually touch someone, those people have jobs to do and they have to manage their workflow. And the other thing is a lot of those things didn't go reported. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what the issues were. So the reality is that 311 is great. It is a, you know, continent leading approach to data management, to big data management, and to response. And having said all of those things, sometimes it still screws up. And so when it does screw up, what you need is you need a counselor's office who's plugged in. So always call 311 to initiate the complaint. And if it's solved instantly or whatever, that's great. But if it's a pernicious problem, call your council office. So you call Jordan and Schiff in Ward 9. You call Bethel and Mohammed in Ward 10. You call, who are we?
Randall, Roman, or Stan in Ward 5.
In Ward 5. And what you always have to bring is the service request number, because that service request number is the key to figuring out where it is in the process, to pushing it along, and if it stalls out, to understanding what the systemic issue is so that we can work with 311 to make sure that that never happens again and these things actually get solved. So let's talk about some actual problems we can.
I want to touch on that super quick as well. One of the biggest issues we've had in Ward 5 is getting people to call 311, and we've seen a huge uptick because we've been promoting that and pushing that, because people always want to talk to me or staff, but we do need those service request numbers. 311 is also multilingual. If you cannot speak a certain language, and maybe you want to speak Punjabi, you can say, I want to speak Punjabi. They'll link you with a Punjabi speaker to take your request. We need that data to help drive the decisions that we want to get made for our community. So it's very important. I just want to stress, please call 311.
Yeah, the data is such a powerful thing, because if we see that there's this issue cropping up again and again and again, we know we've got a problem that needs to be addressed on more than a one-off. And so if you're not creating that paper trail, you're not helping us not only help you, but you're not helping us solve the bigger problem.
You can also do it on your smartphone.
You can. There's an app. Also, you can do it on the website. So if you're like me and you just have a lot of trouble finding motivation to speak to somebody on the telephone, you can use your app, you can use email, you can even Yeah, you can just go on the website without even having to use email.
You
and
can
fill out
tweet
the form.
at 311
You can
Calvary
also
too.
tweet at 311 Calvary.
And you can tag Ward 10 office, Ward 9 office.
Super quick story, I was with Mayor Nenshi during the hailstorm driving, we found a bus stop, a drain full, overflowing. I was driving, he opened the window, we both had our masks on, he took a picture, right then reported to 311, and I believe within maybe an hour or two, that issue was dealt with.
And
That's
they
how quick it
notify,
was.
so on the
Yes.
app, if you do that, they will actually mark it as resolved, which is great for people who need and want that follow-up.
Sometimes it will be marked as resolved and it's not resolved, and that's when people lose their mind, understandably, but that's why we're here to help.
Okay, so
Next one.
speaking of transit stops and everyone, can we talk about issues with snow removal at bus stops and sidewalk repairs? How do we help expedite some of those issues that seem to be recurring often?
So I will jump in and say that we have, we've been holding our budget tight through the downturn, but one of the places where we have pumped a lot of money into is in active modes and all of that. We've also tried to get the arsenal of park staff, transit, road staff, and then the group of private contractors who help us respond to these things. We've really worked to sort of get them working all together in an unprecedented way. Every snowstorm at the first of the year, there's a new crew doing stuff and things get missed. And that's why 311 helps, share it with us, and make sure that those things don't happen. And with regard to the money, we've got an increased fund for sidewalk repair and stuff like that. Whereas everything else, the funding's gone down. But there's, we have so much infrastructure like that, and it just goes on the list. And advocate, let us know. I keep a running tally of all the things that we need to get done, and I meet with the transportation department, and 311 helps us do that. So
I just want to touch really quick. Last year, we were hit with a massive snowstorm over the Christmas holidays. That's hard to react to anywhere, anytime. Doesn't
it's
matter.
a third of our annual precipitation
In
in
one
one
day.
event.
And so to clean that, I know it's so challenging to get out of your neighborhoods, and what we did as a council, and we brought forward, there's a notice of motion brought forward, which council supported, to relook at our snow clearing policies, to really relook at this, because we are seeing these dramatic climate events occur. 47 centimeters, 50 centimeters of snow that falls overnight. How do we deal with it? How can we react quicker? How do we, in those situations, there's gonna be snow at those bus stops. We may not be able to get to them as quickly as we like, but that's what we're trying to improve. So as we move forward, and that's something with this policy change will help us, and also will need maybe more budget to deal with that as well.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. We've tweaked the budget 2 times, and this is the 3rd time to just refine it down. But at a certain point, if we want better snow and ice control, we're gonna need to spend more money.
The conversation we need to have is in our residential communities, how much service we can provide, particularly in those dense communities like Saddle Ridge, where you're in a cul-de-sac and it's tight. What do you do?
If the point is that we've relied on the Chinooks, and sometimes there's some downtime in between that, and if we wanna get to those things and do it right, we're gonna have to pay for it. So the
Okay,
big question is,
I'm sneaking in now, I'm sneaking in. We can answer those big questions another time. It's 9:05. I'm
Yes.
really cognizant of, our guests who have chosen to spend the evening with us.
I love it. I can stay here as long as you want.
I know, but.
our wives are not as into it as we are.
Or kids, it's my daughter's birthday today.
Oh,
What?
Happy birthday to her, I'll be home soon, don't you worry.
Okay, we've got
Tell
one,
your dad.
we've got, don't see. We've got one more question.
Water dinner and a green cupcake, she's happy until I get home.
We've got one more question, and it's around crime and public safety.
Yes.
We've got a task force, if we can quickly touch on that and how that
Do you know
interacts.
anything about the public safety task force?
Yeah.
And then we're gonna take a couple minutes to wrap up and bid our guests good night.
All right, I'm gonna talk about this. This has been a priority of mine since being elected. The gun and gang violence we've seen in the city of Calgary. It's gone, we had 112 shootings last year, which is a big increase from 89 the year before, and steadily increased year after year. This was a concern for me. I brought forward a notice of motion to take action on this issue. I just felt enough wasn't being done. It's a concern for East Calgary communities across the board. So last year we started a public safety task force. We got hit with COVID. Wow, how do we do this? So we did it during COVID. We did engagement sessions virtually. We talked to members of our community. We talked about the lack of opportunity, poverty, trauma, systemic racism. What can we do better? And this was a very collaborative approach. I think this was a very innovative approach because we did the horizontal and the vertical being free level of government. We had Minister Bill Blair at his office directly involved in the work we're doing. So thank you, Minister Bill Blair from Toronto, the former police chief, from MP from Scarborough. Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness. We had a MLA, Nikki Amory from Calgary East, myself as the chair from Ward 5. Mayor Nanshi's involved. We had community, public from CDE. We had a representative from nonprofits, from our Indigenous and Black communities, from the Calgary Police Service. So we had a wide range of community members to look at issues and what we could do better. We are finishing our report. We've done a year worth of engagement through town halls, public engagement sessions with members of our communities, community associations, a public survey that went out. So we collected all this information. We're bringing forward recommendations to the community-based public safety task force to Councillor Carra's Community and Protective Services Committee on April 14th. If those recommendations are approved, they'll be going to council or further. I think the greater opportunity is highlighted a lot of gaps in our service delivery, culturally aware programs, and gang life strategy, and what we need to do as a local community and government to do better. The great thing is Minister Blair announced a big funding initiative in the fall, and we will see funding come directly to our communities in the near future as the program rolls out that will support crime prevention, public safety initiatives in East Calgary. One thing I do want to do, and sorry, I'm going to be really quick, I think we need to do some public safety audits in our communities like we have done in the Crossroads community. These need to be in all of our communities because all of our communities have different needs and challenges. If you get a train, there's different needs and challenges. What are some of the other challenges? These public safety audits can help inform actions we need to make our communities feel safer.
And just, I want to shout out to the 12 Community Safety Initiative, which spans both Ward 9 and Lower Ward 10. And they're a great community organization of 12 community associations focused on those kind of safety audits and a lot of other great work focused on safety. The other thing I want to note, of course, is that we are in the process of establishing a community safety investment framework, which is where we're taking increasing chunks of money and putting them into alternative response models. So it's not just the police responding to everything, but it's the appropriate service at the appropriate time, culturally appropriately rolled out. And I think that when all of this sort of comes to pass, we've got $16 million in year one. We've got 8 million, we're trying to squeeze another 8 million, so it becomes 16 year over year from the police, and we'll see what we can do to build that with federal funding and stuff like that.
And to make this happen, the final item on this, to make this happen, we need community and law enforcement, the police service to work together. This is a partnership. It's not one or the other. It is a partnership to get effective solutions for safer communities.
Awesome. Thank you both for spending the evening with us and answering so many questions. We've had a lot of comments that thank you both for touching on so many different topics. Of course, there's stuff that we didn't cover. Obviously, we'll have to do it again.
We should do it again.
I think we should. I had a lot. This was great.
So
we'll have to do it in person if we could.
Yeah, me too.
Hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon. Just to wrap up, for all of our guests that are still with us, which seems to be quite a few of them, if you have any other questions, please reach out to the Ward 10 team. Their email is ward10@calvary.ca, or you can contact the phone number that was mentioned earlier. Thanks so much for being with us, and any last words? I regret even asking.
I would like to note that East Calgary is a very special part of the city of Calgary. I believe it's the best part. I think it built the city, and I think its diversity of land uses, its diversity of people will build Calgary's next era as well. And I think it's really important that we all come together as East Calgary people and are very thoughtful about who we elect and how they can work with the rest of council. So I think that the opportunity for George and I, who work so well together, to collaborate for a little while representing Ward 10. I think we have to be very thoughtful about who joins us on that empty spot come October, and make sure that we're thinking collectively, since so many of our communities overlap across that landscape.
I agree with everything Giancarlo said. I'm here to stand and fight for the East, and I'm going to continue to do so. I just want to give a quick plug. April 7th, 7 p.m. COVID-related town hall. Please look at our website, georgechahal.ca, for more information if you want to join. We have some great special guests, lots of great information. When it's your turn, please get vaccinated and make sure your friends and neighbors and everybody you know does so as well. Please be safe and please take care.
Awesome.
Thanks for taking your time with us today.
That's a wrap.